Is there any better time to be in the inland Northwest than the fall? Autumn colors, crisp air, and the return of some of our favorite customs bring out the best our region has to offer. This year has been kinder to the inland Northwest economy than expected. The labor market has remained strong. Our entrepreneurial ecosystem is thriving, and the financial sector remains a pillar of stability. We've avoided a recession so far, and it makes one wonder, is this what a soft landing looks like? Of course, we still have our challenges. The healthcare sector is still grappling with rising costs. Higher interest rates make capital harder to come by for some, and an especially contentious election season seems to be testing our resolve. But here in the inland Northwest, we don't shy away from a challenge. We are resilient, resourceful, and strong. At the Journal of Business, we endeavor to keep you, our readers, informed about what's happening in your community. Our staff is dedicated to providing you with objective information on news and trends, with the goal of helping you be more successful on your chosen path. It's time to go beyond the sound bites. It's time for more depth than 140 characters can provide. It's time for elevating the conversation. Welcome to Elevating the Conversation. My name is Lynn Parrish. I'm the editor of the Journal of Business. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is not Michelle Armstrong.
Thank you for letting me know.
Michelle had been exposed to COVID from a family member who tested positive yesterday. We thought it would be best that she stay home with her family, and Bill Kalivas, co-founder of LaunchPad Northwest, has stepped in at the last minute to help us talk about Spokane's entrepreneurial ecosystem. So my understanding is Michelle is watching from home. We hope you're well, and we hope we do you proud today, Michelle. Bill, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good.
Thank you for the invite. Obviously, wish it was under better circumstances, and wish Michelle and her family all the best and safe recovery and everything. Yeah,
Absolutely.
You bet. But always good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Yeah,
good
you bet.
See you. So I was thinking about it, and I don't know if you remember, but you and I first met in 2001. I'm going to age us here real quick. So I was a very young reporter at that time, hardly out of college, I think.
I was middle-aged.
And anyway, we were doing a story called, the headline ended up being High-Tech Hotshots Come Home, and it was about people who had worked in Silicon Valley and then returned to Spokane, people who had grown up here, worked in Silicon Valley, returned to Spokane. And you were one of the handful of people that we talked to for that story. And I thought about that as I was preparing for this, and I was thinking about how different things were there. And I just wondered if you could kind of paint a picture of what the innovation economy or the entrepreneurial ecosystem looked like in the early 2000s in Spokane.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Great memory. And in fact, we had an event a few months ago, and I invited one of the other folks that was in that article, featured in the article, Steve Humbrecht, of Treasury 4.
Yeah.
And he and I were talking about that very article.
Oh, great.
And we remembered that, and it was just a great memory, and really appreciated even being featured in that. But yeah, it was a wonderful time in that it felt like Spokane was itself a startup. Mm-hmm. So if you're, having been down in the valley, super busy, lots going on, a lot of headquarters, a lot of recognizable logos everywhere on every building, products that you use every day. And I was down there for 5 years, from 94 to 99.
Sure.
But when I moved back in 99, right before I moved back, there was an article in Forbes magazine, had done a ranking of the top 162 regions for doing business in the innovation economy.
Sure.
And we were ranked second to last in Spokane.
Spokane was.
Yeah,
sure.
And so when I moved back, there was already some initiatives to really address that, because I think a lot of folks locally were feeling like, that's actually not fair. We felt like we had been doing better, but the metrics they used, it really showed that we had some work to do.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So I went to work for Cisco Systems, and I got to meet startups all over the region, because that's what I did, help them get the electronics to get on the internet, which was a new thing.
Sure.
And I in my mind, what we had was a hidden innovation economy. Mm-hmm. But perception-wise, I think probably true in most ways. We didn't really have a recognizable entrepreneurial ecosystem where people could point to, hey, here's where you can go to get help if you have an idea. There were organizations for sure, but it was just tough to find them. It wasn't that easy to plug in.
Sure. Well, and not to spend too much time on the past, but we were really just a decade out of the concerted effort by the business community to move away from a natural resources-based economy, which had been the staple of Spokane's economy for since inception almost.
For sure.
Yeah. And so very young time. I did want to ask you about one more thing, one more back in the day question, and my memory is a little bit hazier on this one. I remember a few years after that, or a couple years after that, I think, you were part of an event at the Holly Mason building, and where it was something like we hadn't really seen much of at that point, and it was kind of a combination networking trade show, but tech-based, and there were, I want to say 300 people there, more than you would think.
Yeah.
So what was that? Do you remember that?
No, it's that's funny you mentioned that because it's how we started LaunchPad, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So it was myself, Rob Brewster.
Oh, sure.
And Elizabeth Bird at the time, Matt Bird, and 2 or 3 other people. Jess Walter used to hang out there sometimes at the Rocket over in Dan Spalding's building. And we were talking to Rob one day, and he had purchased a Holly Mason, and it really didn't have a lot of tenants yet.
Sure.
And we were kicking around ideas because he wanted to get more attraction, more attention to the building. And I said, down in the Bay Area, I'd gone to a few of these events that VCs would put on that were high energy, lots of fun, music and cocktails and just a lot of networking. And I said, what if we throw a party, kind of a tech party at your building, which is gorgeous, right? Sure. In fact, I had my wedding reception there.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Wow. My wife and I just love that building. But anyway, so we thought, and this was before social media. So we thought, we called it LaunchPad, and I knew a lot of entrepreneurs. So we invited 20 to host tables, and then I invited speakers from Cisco, and we thought we'd get 100, maybe 150 people to show up. But with no social media, we had no idea. Well, we estimated, and the paper estimated the next day, we had close to 700.
Oh, wow.
And all 3 TV stations. And we got the Strombergs to donate beer. So we gave away free beer. Yeah. And they said, we'll donate the beer as long as you can give away cups that have Coeur d'Alene Brewing on them. Right. Which was really smart. Yeah. And so, that was the start of the LaunchPad event that we did for about 6 years. Okay. Yeah. Great memory, though.
Yeah. Well, thank you for indulging our trip down memory lane. I guess that's a long way of asking, how has that ecosystem evolved over the last 20 years?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let's just talk about now.
Sure.
Right now, I'm the most excited I've ever been about what's happening in the region, not just Spokane, but North Idaho, Eastern Washington, the Palouse, all the way up to Sandpoint, Eastern Washington, North Idaho. There is so much vibrancy and so many incredible ideas. It's not just tech, it's not just life science. There are some incredible tabletoppers, for example.
Sure.
There are so many incredible ideas. I believe now is the best time to be an entrepreneur in our region because of cloud computing. You can start up, you don't need all the technology. You don't have to go out and purchase. You can just start up with a credit card and start using some of this technology.
As opposed to buying hardware.
As opposed to buying hardware, yeah. And just full disclosure, my daytime job, I work for Google Cloud.
Sure.
So I'm a sales rep. I have accounts here in Spokane, Boise, the Bay Area, and Portland. But that's not the only thing. I mean, there's just several resources, several organizations collaborating. And that was the challenge back in the day, that when you refer to back in those days, I think a big part of it was there wasn't a lot of money to go around funding these organizations, whether it was local sponsorship or federal funding or state funding, county funding. It was very limited resources going towards these organizations. And the emphasis wasn't as much on entrepreneurial growth, which I think really is the key. It was more about how do we attract talent? How do we use money to build workforce development programs.
Sure.
And I was on the workforce development board, which I agree with that.
Absolutely.
But you need just like any diet or a funding strategy, you need diversity. So you need all of the elements working together. That's how a true ecosystem works. So at the time, we just didn't have the focus on entrepreneurism. To today, you have Tom Simpson, what he's doing at Ignite, you have SCORE, SBDC, what Mark Pond's doing with Startup Spokane, Ahana, and the groups that are supporting immigrants, the multi-ethnic organizations, women-owned businesses. There are so many organizations available now. You'd be hard-pressed to not find a resource if you have an idea. The question is it fundable?
Sure.
That's where it gets a little tricky, and you really got to do your homework and be ready.
Yeah,
So,
and I know this isn't exactly your wheelhouse, but my impression is that the funding has become more plentiful in recent years. Now you do hear some on the national level about VCs being a little tighter than they were 2 or 3 years ago, but big picture in Spokane, funding is a lot more plentiful than it was at one time.
absolutely. No, and you're right. It's interesting. If you're a person looking for money and you're not getting it, then you're going to say funding is tight, and you're going to say, there's no funding.
Right.
It's about perspective. If you look at Treasury 4, Steve Humbrecht's company, they just got $20 million from MetCap, a major player in the VC industry, Spiceology, right? Vega Cloud, all received VC funding, but were ideas that started here at a very early stage. Some of them went through Ignite, some of them were just bootstrapping until they were ready to go.
Yeah.
I just think the ecosystem is different. There's so many success stories now where people had an exit and now they're reinvesting and they're starting companies, and they're really interested in getting employees from Eastern, Gonzaga, WSU, University of Idaho, Whitworth. We just have, the ecosystem is working better now. It's not perfect. We still have quite a few gaps that I think we could connect those gaps, make bridges to each element better. But we need to do a better job of telling the story. It's not so much that we don't have funding. It's just we don't tell the story enough. Other than Journal of Business, the spokesman, once in a while a story. What could we be doing more to tell those great stories so people realize that?
Sure.
I think that's
a great question.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at now at LaunchPad.
Yeah.
That's one of the key things that we're really addressing.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Hey, I do want to mention, of course, I have more questions for Bill, and we could probably talk for quite some time. But if you have questions, there is a Q&A feature in chat. Please type in your questions at any time. And here in another 10 minutes or so, we'll see if Bill has any answers for those. So.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. You bring up something, and I don't want to get too far off the subject, but you brought up the local universities, and that's something else that has changed profoundly over the last 20 years, is the presence of some of the universities in the Spokane area. A lot of it's focused on health sciences, but I wonder what role that plays in this startup economy that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm on the board of Eastern's CSTEM advisory board. But what I'm seeing going on at Gonzaga and WSU with the medical school and the focus on the medical arena here locally is pretty exciting. And in most communities around the country, universities play a big role in economic development, in technology transfer, but also in just making sure the students become connected to the community. And that's the key. And I think we're doing a good job, but I think we can do a better job of figuring out. Everyone always says, and they say this all over the country, by the way, how do we get our kids to stay here? Well, I left twice. I mean, I boomeranged, but came back. But so many kids just leave anyway. Young people leave anyway just because they're curious, and they think the nightlife is better over here, or I'll meet more young professionals in different cities. I did that. But there's just something unique about this area. And as we know, after the pandemic, many people, especially tech workers like myself that are remote, I've lived here for most of my life, and I've been in tech for almost 30 years. and I've always been a remote worker.
Sure.
So my headquarters has predominantly been in Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And now many people have moved here because it's a great way of life. The traffic's not as bad. The housing is still affordable.
Sure.
But there's just now there's this energy in Spokane, in the region, that a lot of times people don't see. You won't see it in the news. You won't see it, on TV in the news. But you can feel it when you're out. You can
Sure.
feel it when you're talking to people.
Sure.
There's a different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that. I'm starting to really enjoy new ways of thinking by people that have moved here and have different ideas. And let's face it, leadership has changed, right? Leadership has really changed, and I think we're seeing the effects of that. I'm excited for it quite a bit.
Yeah, great. So let's talk a little bit about gaps. You said that the ecosystem is functioning efficiently at this time, but there are still some things to improve on. What are some of the places where we could see some improvement in your mind?
Yeah, I think going back to the universities, being able to get connected. I think connecting with students at an earlier age. Mm-hmm. So let me back up real quick. So in 2003, when I was with Intech, the organization, when I left Cisco, I went to work for Intech, and we actually hired a consultant, Nathan Brown, at the time was running a consulting agency, co-founder of Treasury 4.
Yeah, Treasury 4 is getting some mad play here today.
Well, he wrote a report called Developing an Innovation Economy for Spokane and the Inland Northwest. It was sponsored by CERDI and Spokane EDC and Intech. And it had very specific action items to help build and strengthen the innovation economy from North Idaho all the way down to Tri-Cities. Right. So if you look at the innovation assets we have, so you have the innovation, research and the private sector companies. We had more than I think people even realized. And then you have the capital, so you have the money. And then you have the workforce, you have the human capital. Those are the three main elements. And he points out that every year we have 60,000 students that graduate every year. So one of the big gaps that we're addressing, so we're literally taking that report, dusting it off as part of LaunchPad, and we're actually going to help that create that initiative locally. We're partnering with several major organizations, the universities, the capital providers, to say, Nathan had some really good ideas, and Nathan is working with us. So one of the first recommendations is a K-12 outreach. How do we reach out to kids in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade? Introduce them to STEM, introduce them to trade schools at an early age, and then stick with them all the way through high school, through college. So think about what Launch Northwest is doing with Innovia. One of their big things is every student should be able to go to college and help fund that. Well, what can we do to help make sure they stay here? Because even if we fund their education, we want to make sure they're not leaving. Some will, we know that. But what can we do to keep them excited about here by getting them engaged early and stay connected throughout the whole process? There are so many great companies here that we don't talk about, on a regular basis. And so we need to do more to engage the kids early, but also engage the companies. And make sure people realize there's some really cool stuff going on here. So at LaunchPad, we're taking all those steps that Nathan pointed out, and we're actually going to do them to help strengthen the innovation economy.
Yeah. I actually read that executive summary you sent me from 2003. And one of the interesting things, and this is a fine point, but one of the interesting things is the triangle that you drew was Spokane, Tri-Cities, and Moscow Pullman.
The Palouse.
And it's interesting because Ignite, some of what it uses is a triangle as well, but going the opposite direction where it's Spokane, Sandpoint, and then Moscow Pullman. And it made me wonder what has changed in the Sandpoint area to put it more on the radar at this point. We all know what's in the Tri-Cities. But
that's a good question.
But it's kind of an interesting fine point, but kind of an interesting.
Well,
one.
it's remember Coldwater Creek?
Oh, of course.
So they went out of business, or I don't remember if they actually went out of business or got acquired.
They filed for bankruptcy. And were acquired.
So some other companies have moved up there. Money often follows talent, right?
Sure.
So a company called Kochava is up in
Oh,
Sandpoint,
sure. Yeah,
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Very successful in the analytics industry. And there's other employers up there, and it's a wonderful place to live. You've got, you know, Ponderay, Lake Ponderay, you've got
Yeah, tough to
Schweitzer.
beat.
And it's a really, so people are really starting to gravitate towards cities like Boulder and Austin and others where there's just a great lifestyle.
Sure.
Well, Sandpoint has this incredible lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's a hidden gem. And people would be shocked how many high-tech workers live up there. And some of them are like, let's start a company. So
Right.
you've got a really cool vibe and culture up there. And same thing with the Palouse.
Yeah.
You've got some really cool things, obviously WSU and University of Idaho. They're winning a lot of grants right now, by the way.
Yeah.
And then Tri-Cities, same thing, Spokane, North Idaho, Coeur d'Alene corridor. There's just a lot happening that we're not really aware of. Doesn't mean it's not happening.
Sure.
It's just, you know, it's the hidden economy still.
Yeah. Right.
So what we're trying to do is find those other gaps. Like, how do you connect more of the entrepreneurs to the resources, the mentoring, to help them so they, you know, when people say, you know, we can't find money, money will find you if you have a great idea and you have people on your team who have experience. There's a formula investors look for. So we want to help improve their odds. There's so many good ideas. We're ramping up the resources for mentoring. And a lot of the mentors are people who have done it and moved here.
Yeah.
That have that experience. And your article that you did when LaunchPad announced we were coming back.
Sure.
I had people coming out of the woodwork, companies and retired folks asking me to get involved.
Yeah.
Because they want to stay active and they have a lot of experience.
They want to help others. Sure.
So the collective experience, our greatest resource is the people. The people, a person's knowledge of starting a company and all the pain that goes with that.
Yeah.
If we can infuse some wisdom into the younger folks and anyone trying to start a business, put some really smart people around them with different skills.
Sure.
So that's what we're doing to try to help, but also tell them to go talk to Mark Pond at Startup Spokane.
Right.
As kind of the front door for all of our entrepreneur activity.
Yeah.
And SP3 Northwest, where Michelle works, doing an incredible job with life sciences and tech mentoring as part of the WSU program. So there's just a ton going on that we want to kind of figure out a way to make that apparent and start promoting that around the nation about what's happening here.
Sure.
So on the outwardly, but also people in our region.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll get to questions here real quick. So please, if you have any, weigh in and we'll get to them. One thing I've thought about when you think about startups here, so when you go way back, a lot of them are energy based. It's kind of amazing how much success companies have had here in the energy market. And I'm thinking about Itron, Schweitzer Engineering Labs, amazing story.
Yeah.
And then when you think about more recent companies, I feel like we've seen a lot of success, and I don't know if it's more than other markets, but I feel like we've seen a lot of success in the fintech market, the financial technology.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if you see any areas that are ripe for startup growth, any sectors like that. Does anything come to mind?
A little bit, yeah. And I mean, you brought up energy, which is great. I think we're going to see more in other areas similar to energy, like agriculture, right? But if you back up, Avista was really the engine of innovation in a lot of ways, with Avista Labs, you know, becoming Relion, Itron, a spinoff, obviously, and Itronics, which was acquired by General Dynamics. So Avista really is, and they're doing some unbelievable stuff now at the Scott Morris Center and the Catalyst building. You know, they're working on some really interesting stuff. But the energy sector is interesting because I'm on the board of Urbanova, and we're partnering with Intent, a collaborative group of WSU, University of Idaho, Avista, and other organizations, and we won a $1 million grant. And if we can create an engine over the next couple of years, an NSF grant, we could be in the running for a $160 million grant to help create companies that are focused on technologies for decarbonization. And so, that is such a powerful thing to have all of those entities collaborating and working together. Well, I think we have the same thing with the Health Science Initiative, right? With the innovation, with the new building, and what GSI is doing to bring that whole fund together and the grants that they're. I think I don't remember seeing this many projects coming together. I would love to see something around cybersecurity.
Oh, sure.
Cybersecurity, and you featured an article about that, and we had an event last year, and we're going to be doing another one.
Oh, good.
But cybersecurity is one of those, with the school at Eastern, where they do the cybersecurity training.
Yeah.
There are so many smaller companies in the region that are just kind of doing their thing. People are unaware of, maybe on purpose.
Sure.
But it's really an interesting kind of mini cluster in the region. There's a lot of talent.
That's a great point.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent. And that's one of those industries where they can't hire people fast enough. So I encourage younger people to look at cybersecurity as a potential area to go into. Obviously, AI. There's actually some AI talent here in the universities at Gonzaga, for example, with Pangeon, somebody that we're working with, and some other folks. There's a need for AI, that, as long as it's responsible, clearly.
Sure.
But some of those, if we have an ecosystem, an engine that is working together and all those parts connected, it doesn't really matter what technology or idea comes up. If there's a market for it, we in this region should have an ecosystem that can support it.
Sure.
That's why we want to strengthen all of those all those elements that were in Nathan's report. How do we connect all those pieces so the engine is working?
Yeah.
Regardless of the industry. Obviously health sciences is going to be really important going forward. Cybersecurity, I think different type of products to replace plastics, to replace some type of fuel, obviously the wine industry, what WSU has done, we need more of that. We definitely need more wine. Lots of great breweries around here, but I'm excited that, it doesn't really matter what we come up with, as long as we have this ecosystem that's functioning, I think it'll, we can help grow a lot of these companies here locally.
Yeah, and we've spent a lot of time talking about tech in this conversation, but there are a lot of companies that you've touched on and others out there that are really more Main Street businesses, I guess you'd say. Yeah. And so, I mean, you mentioned tabletoppers. That's online retail. That's but it's an interesting idea that has some potential. We have a story about it in our paper that came out today, actually.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And so, a lot of
there's a ton of those stories. It's really, if you go to some of Ignite's and SP3 Northwest and other groups where they bring entrepreneurs together, there's a ton of people here pitching ideas that need help. They need mentoring, and sometimes they need to be told that's not a great idea. When I brought the Connect program here from San Diego, the first thing they told me was you need people that are coachable, and you also need to be able to kill bad ideas, so they're not wasting a lot of time and money. And so there's just a different vibe here now. There's a lot of really good ideas, and some come from existing companies, some come from college students, professors, researchers, people with just, we met with a young woman today who started a company called Golden Sherpa.
Oh, sure.
With helping people get access to all the resources they need and homes for seniors.
For an aging parent, usually.
And we went through that as a family, and it was tough.
Yeah.
So if anyone's gone through that, but she uses technology, but it's not a traditional tech company,
right?
Or tech idea.
Sure.
I tell everyone we're all in the innovation economy.
Sure.
But we don't necessarily think we're all in tech, but we all use a smartphone.
Right.
If you're on social media, you are the product in a lot of ways, right? So understand your value, understand your role in that, because it can be used for a very good thing. So I think we all have to kind of think of ourselves as part of the tech economy in one way or another, whether you work in it or not.
Absolutely.
And some of those traditional ideas are great. I mean, they're solving problems, which I love. I love to hear ideas like that.
Sure. Let's see. Do we have any questions? No questions. Okay. Well, let's.
I'm sorry, I'm not Michelle.
Well, let's tie a bow on it. Any parting thoughts on your end?
No, I mean, this is a great opportunity. I really appreciate what you're doing, what the journal does in covering all the companies and the organizations and the good news. There's plenty of bad news. There's plenty of tough stuff, but the journal's always talking about what's really happening in the region, which is great. So at LaunchPad, if people are interested, we'll be coming out with our website, our newsletter, and our 3 programs soon. So Springboard, networking for tech and life science companies, our executive breakfast, which we'll be doing, which is mentoring and coaching for emerging leaders, and then a quarterly networking event. Our next event will be in early November, focused on aerospace and advanced manufacturing.
Fantastic.
Partnering with GSI, City of Spokane Valley,
Great.
Valley Chamber. So we're also, those are the events and the programs, but our focus is really this innovation economy idea. And again, it doesn't have to be tech or life science, but it's really how do we really ramp up this engine of innovation in the region and get connected with Tri-Cities, North Idaho, and make sure everyone, has an opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Bill, so good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
and thank you for joining us. Please join us next month. We'll have Cindy Donahue, founder of Amplifying Women's Voices. She's going to be here to talk about women in business. Until then, enjoy the fall, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.